Episode 5, Bedbound in Spite, Not Recovery. Dusk and Ember, a survivor's journal. The first few weeks in the spinal unit weren't recovery. They were emotional confinement dressed as care, quiet punishment disguised as policy. I wasn't being rehabilitated. I was being contained. Stuck in bed. Watched, ignored, and barely acknowledged. And at first, I blamed myself. I believed the pressure sores forming on my hips were because I wasn't moving enough. I thought the discomfort, the stinging skin, the bloated bruises, and the silence were just part of the process. But they weren't. It wasn't my failure. It was their neglect. Every morning, I asked one simple thing. Can I please be pushed outside today, just for some air? And every time, I was met with, maybe later. We'll see what we can do. Not today. Not today became not ever. While others were routinely walked or wheeled into the sun, I remained trapped in bed. No offers. No options. No care. It wasn't physical immobility that kept me indoors, it was institutional cruelty. The only words I remember clearly from the nurses during those weeks? Stay in bed. That phrase became my prison sentence. Not for safety. Not for healing. But to keep me quiet, controlled, and unseen. Even the smallest acts of human dignity became a fight. I was never offered a bedsheet change unless I was getting a bed-prone shower, and even that was rare. When it did happen, I wasn't cared for gently. I was pushed naked under a single sheet, hoisted onto the bed prone, and paraded across the entire ward, past the nurse station where everyone could see me, exposed, vulnerable, and humiliated. It was not a shower. It was a spectacle. A reminder that I wasn't seen as a woman, just a job to complete. When the deep bruises began spreading across my abdomen from blood thinners, I asked for cream. No one gave me any. They never even looked twice. I was washed with cold cloths daily, no soap, no warmth. Not once did I receive proper wipes or barrier creams unless I demanded it. Even then, only once in 9 months. They knew I was bariatric and high risk for clotting, yet I was never offered compression stockings. Not once. And when I showered, I was given 2 towels, despite 4 being the bariatric minimum. Always rushed. Always last. Sometimes I wouldn't shower until after 12 p.m., long after everyone else had eaten and dressed. Other times, I was skipped entirely, told there was no commode available. I remember being pushed out on a manual wheelchair, one I couldn't even operate because of my weak left arm. And I thought to myself, greater than, is this really what I've become? Am I letting these people convince me I'm nothing? I felt like a forgotten object, rolled in and out for display. Not for healing, not for choice, but for routine performance. The first 4 weeks in the spinal unit, I cried every single night. Not sobbing. Not screaming. But weeping in silence, where every breath felt like a prayer. Greater than, I miss my family. I missed myself. I missed being seen. The pain wasn't just physical, it was emotional starvation. I prayed harder than I ever had before. God, please don't let me be invisible in here. 2 months in, I was finally allowed an hour outside in the chair. Then 2. That was my progress. But it wasn't freedom, it was a leash on a longer chain. When I asked for my power wheelchair trial, they knew it made sense. I had been driving for nearly 20 years. They gave it to me. Then said, you're not allowed to leave the ward. Only drive inside here. Inside only. Like a child who couldn't be trusted. Like a risk. In physio, I asked for the bike. I was never offered it. I asked for hydrotherapy, it was never considered, despite it being my top rehab goal. They offered me walking. I could barely walk. And when I started asking why, asking when, asking what changed, that's when everything else changed. After I began submitting formal complaints, the stuff shifted. The energy shifted. Suddenly, I was treated like a problem. Not a patient. Not a person. Nurses avoided my room entirely, or they'd walk in overly nice, performative, nervous. Like they'd been told to pretend to care, but not to actually help. My hygiene declined again. I stopped being prioritized. I was always last. Rushed. Skipped. Silenced. And when I requested female-only care for intimate tasks, they still sent a male nurse to check my bottom. No knock, no warning, no respect. I reported it. Greater than they labeled me compulsive. A code word. A way to erase the real complaint and protect themselves. I wasn't offered therapy. No one asked about my mental health. Instead, I was woken constantly, checked without knocking, interrupted without thought. No privacy. No rest. No protection. I stopped going to physio. I started fading emotionally. I withdrew. Because they weren't helping, they were hurting. They weren't watching me heal, they were watching me fall silent. I started noticing the deeper patterns. The way every support aligned to dismiss me. The way they worked together, not to support me, but to suppress me. They didn't forget me. They just didn't want to acknowledge I was still watching. This wasn't care. This wasn't rehab. This was control. This was retaliation disguised as recovery. This was the system deciding I wasn't worth fighting for. So I started fighting for myself. End of episode 5, Dusk and Ember. Title, Bedbound in Spite, Not Recovery. Follow on Instagram, @JusticeForTheForgotten 2025. Please share this episode to help amplify the voices of those still silenced. Patreon coming soon. Support this fight for truth, justice,